Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot, a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building all the ways we'll consume information and entertainment in the future. I'm excited this week to talk to Jordan Young. Jordan's a longtime music artist and producer who's worked with the likes of Jay-Z, the Chainsmokers, and Coldplay. He's also the CEO of Hooky. So what's Hooky? Well, first glance, Hooky might look like just another AI startup. But with Hooky, Jordan's actually trying to solve one of the biggest problems in generative AI. How do you ensure content creators can both control and profit from the use of their work, especially when it's used by AI? You might remember that AI song based on the voices of Drake and The Weeknd that made the rounds last fall. It was a very polarizing moment, and it underscored the power of AI, but also how neither of those artists had any say in the creation of that song. So enter Hooky. What it does is give them a say. It enables artists to license their voice to the service, allowing Hooky users to create original songs with that voice, and even distribute them to streaming platforms like Spotify. The artist approves every single song, and how much revenue they get is entirely up to them. The idea makes a ton of sense, but Hooky is also facing some realities. Artists today have a lot of skepticism about AI. The regulatory landscape is really unclear, and there are plenty of competing AI apps that don't have any licensing or safeguards. If you're wondering what Jordan's plan is to take on all that, hey, you got to listen to the conversation. But don't forget to listen to the end where, yes, Taylor Swift does come up. And if you do enjoy the podcast, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. I'd also appreciate it if you'd leave a rating or a review in whatever podcast app you're in. Those really do help the show get in front of more people. Oh, and last, you can check out everything we offer, including AI training classes for media marketing and PR professionals at mediacopilot.ai. All right, now on with the show and my conversation with Jordan Young of Hooky. Jordan, thanks for dropping by the Media Copilot.
Hey, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, I'd love to get into everything you're doing with Hooky. I think it is a super fascinating service, certainly at the intersection of all the concerns about AI with respect not just to music, but all kinds of content, really. I think there's a lot to dive in there. But I'd like to start off with you. Like you have been working at the intersection of music, tech, and now AI for a while. What's your backstory?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Canada. I moved to the U.S. about 20 years ago, and I started my career in New York City in 2005. And I started in music. I was an intern, and then worked my way up and was a recording engineer and mix engineer and producer and songwriter. So I've sort of worn every hat creatively with respect to music. And fortunately, I've had a great career in music. I'm a Grammy winner, and I've worked on with some of the biggest artists in the world, and I think sold close to 200 million records. So I've had a nice run or a nice go at the music side of things. And
Nice.
then I sort of, not to mention, I've also been self-managed my whole career. So I also really paid a lot of close attention to how the music business works and how it flows and functions. And then during the pandemic, I got a little bored and I started making music plugins. So piece of music software that can manipulate audio and help producers, creators, songwriters, artists, achieve the sound that they want. And we've shipped 5 products there. And then about a year ago, this, through many heard it through the same way. Ghostwriter made this Drake and Weeknd song "Hard on My Sleeve," and it sort of amazed the internet, and it brought me back to when I was in high school when Napster came out. It was like this, a different one is for consumption, one is for creation, but it was this sort of transformative technology. And so I took a stab. I sort of dug into the weeds on it, and I took a stab at, could I make a song? And I found a Kanye West voice model. It was the only one I could find readily that sounded decent. And so I worked with a songwriter who was signed to me, and we made a, Kanye West AI song just to experiment. And I posted it on my Instagram and asked the question, how do we feel about this? What are the implications of this? I mean, I did this fairly easily. Um,
So you were just goofing around with it
yeah, I
and
was just
seeing what you could do. You weren't
just
sort of trying to release a song and then
no, 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 not at all.
pass that off as something that you should be doing. You
My
were just
face,
kind of testing the temperature.
yeah, my face was on it, and it was really just asking the question, like, okay, I did this in an afternoon. How do we feel about this? And the responses were mixed. But one
Hmm.
thing that came out of it is some venture capitalist friends of mine. One of them heard it and called me and said, "What are you doing? You should solve this problem. Go and solve the problem. Build the company." And
And here's some money to do that, I assume.
well, it was actually somebody else who started the conversation, and then they sent it to another friend of mine, also a venture capitalist. They're sort of like tangentially, sort of, they work on similar projects and invest in similar companies. And then he was like, "We'll fund this. Take a meeting with, I mean, we're interested in funding. Let's take a few
Mhm.
meetings. Let's see how it goes. Meet the partners." And I did, and I got funded, very quickly and surprisingly so. And so it sort of sent me down this rabbit hole of trying to solve the problem. Uh,
Yeah, I'm not surprised just because it's 100% something someone should solve. But given what everything you just said about your backstory and how long you've been working in the business, touching both the tech and the artistry, um, that's exactly the background you want for someone who's going to take this on, right? You don't want a pure tech person to take it on, and you don't want someone who doesn't understand both not just the tech, but also like the ecosystem around the tech, if you will.
yeah, the creative side and also the business side. It's not what we've built with Hooky is not a creative solution. It's not a business solution. It's both. It has to work on both sides. And we've designed it in such a way that follows the same pathway any independent creator would release their own music. So we're not
Mhm.
reinventing the wheel here. We're just really trying to align the rights and sort of nurture this with artists and get them to understand that, you know, is
Yeah,
clearing an AI voice really all that different than clearing a sample?
yeah,
If you go back to I guess it would have been the late 70s, early 80s, there may have been some sort of one-off examples before that, but hip hop was built, the genre was built on sampling. It was built on the drum machine. Well, first it was records, turntables, and DJs sort of
right.
mixing breaks and juggling them and recording those things. And then it was actual drum machines. And now you could sort of like chop up pieces of songs and use them. And in the initial stages of hip hop, sort of evolving, there was no pathway to clear any of these songs. None of that was getting cleared. There was no business structured around it. But as the genre grew, and as the interest grew, and as the business around it grew, it was clear there needed to be a solution. And I don't know exactly who solved that, but I assume the record companies and the publishers came together and figured out some sort of way of doing it. And now, sample clearances are pretty standard practice
Right.
in music. Um, I think the same is going to be true with AI voice. The technology is permeating. It's open source. Anybody can do it. If you stop it in America, they're going to do it in Russia or China. So we need to
Sure.
find a licensed solution. And to reference
Yeah.
the Napster problem, the file sharing problem that happened, 25 years ago, where are we now?
Yeah.
Spotify.
Yeah, totally.
Spotify is just paywalled Napster. We realized the litigation route didn't work. That's just a game of whack-a-mole. The legislation route with DMCA didn't work. And so, where you end up landing is the third L. I call them the three L's, is licensing. And I think
Mm.
that's where we land with voice AI. And it'll take some time, but our hope is to get there and do it in a way that is protecting artists along the way.
Cool. That's great. That's all in the background and the sort of justification, I guess you might call it, for Hooky.
Yeah.
And so when did the company itself sort of take shape? And when did it like launch, I guess, officially?
Uh, well, the company began about a year and maybe 15 months ago, 16 months ago, something like that. That's when we initially were funded. Um, The platform launched in at the beginning of the summer, beginning of June.
Okay, so it's still pretty new.
Yeah, it's still pretty new. I mean, when I was funded, I hadn't built anything. I didn't have a team.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything. It was just an idea. So it took us about a year to build the idea and finally launch it. And now the goal is to sort of nurture this idea amongst artists. And we've done a number of sort of one-off projects. We've done interesting things like language translations. There's a ton of
Yeah.
conversation around
Well,
the
let's
benefits of AI, how it can help artists that we can talk about. But
totally. I noticed that sort of about the website that it's sort of very inviting to everyone on sort of every part of this ecosystem, whether you're an artist or someone who wants to do some voice cloning or even labels, right?
yeah,
But let's get into like exactly sort of what the service is, right? What you offer. So I noticed one of the things you say it's let's say like end to end, so to speak, and I assume that means for someone who is interested in sampling a voice and creating something original. Is that and then what is and then get into what that is in terms of like the product.
yeah. What we mean by end to end is you start your journey at Hooky and you end your journey at Hooky. So you start your journey by licensing a voice. You're going to upload some audio of yourself singing or rapping or whatever, and you're going to choose from any of the artists that we have on platform. Some of them are free voices that are not human. I mean, they are human artists, but we've sort of uh, purchased the voices and created avatars, characters around them that are sort of delineated from the actual human who lent their voice. And then we also have humans who are licensing their voice out, artists who are licensing their voice out. So you can choose what you want. If you're just a creator looking for a generic female background vocalist, you can come and do that. There's no licensing involved. It's a free service, and we'll continue to add those voices. But if you want a specific artist's voice, you'll have to go license that. And so you'll upload your vocal, you'll convert it, you'll preview it, and before you're able to download those files, you will agree to some basic terms. I'll use Jay Sean as the example. He's one of the artists who's on platform. Um, he is requesting 25% of the copyright on the song. So you'll agree to those terms. Part of those terms force you to re-upload the finished song back to Hooky when you're done, when you're ready to submit it for approval. Once you re-upload it back to Hooky, it'll go to Jay Sean. Him or his team will be able to listen to that song and essentially approve it or deny it with one click. And
Right. And until it gets that, it can't really be distributed, right?
yeah, it can't be not legally, not
Right.
legally.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and the thing
Yeah.
is, there's lots of places to go steal voices, but you're never going to be able
Mhm.
to have real business. And the thing here is, the artists and their teams are listening to these songs, which creates an
Mhm.
A&R opportunity. When I started my career, the most important thing, it was never about making money. It was who that I look up to is going to listen to my song. Who can I get to pay attention
Mhm.
to what I'm doing? Which artists can I get to listen? Or producers that I want to work with get to listen. And so this is an opportunity where they are going to listen to your song and they are going to tell you whether they like it or not. And if they like it, they're going to approve it. But you know what? They might really like it and come back and say, I actually want to record this for real as like a real Jay Sean song. I want to get in the studio and actually record this thing. So there's these other,
Mhm.
opportunities that come from it. But in the event that they approve your voice AI clearance, they're going to click approve. And we do a couple things. One, now we've unlocked the distribution service and we are a distributor. So now that song that you've uploaded, you can add your artwork, fill in all your information, your credits, human splits as well, not just AI splits, but we treat the splits on the song. Uh,
For those of us not in the know, what's a split?
the split is, a song makes $100 and you have two people who work on it who each get 50%. The
Oh,
split,
I see. So it's the
the
rev
split is
share.
50-50.
Yeah.
The rev share on the song.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So in addition, so whatever is left after the artist takes its cut, you can still split that.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
in this case, using Jay Sean, he takes 25%. But if you and I, Pete, work on the song together, or maybe you do a part of the song and I want to offer you 25%, I can offer you 25%. So now the splits are 50, 25, and 25 for Jay Sean. So the point is, whether you're a human or AI creator, you're treated the same. And then once that song is distributed, it generates revenue on the DSPs, Spotify, Apple, etc. and that money comes in and we split it accordingly. So we ensure that the artists are paid. Not to mention, we add an AI suffix at the end of their artist name. So in this case, Jay
Mhm.
Sean AI, which means it's going to live on a separate profile from his actual artist profile. We don't want to confuse what's real and what's not, what's AI and what isn't. So we're treating these AI profiles as the artist's like digital alter ego. It's think of it like their Fortnite avatar that you could play with. This is their musical avatar that you can play with and experiment with and try things with, but it has to live separate from their original music. And I think it's important that fans and listeners know what they're listening to. The reality is most people don't care what they listen to. Most people listen
Mm.
passively and they just enjoy a good song. They're not hyper fans. They're not necessarily going to the show or buying the merch. And so for the average person, they just want to hear a great song. And
Mhm.
if you use Drake's voice and he approves it, you know, there is a level of programming that goes into music. I mean, we are all familiar with that voice and we all enjoy that voice. And so that's gonna, if I play you the exact same song with Drake's voice and with my voice, exact same song,
Mhm.
you're gonna probably like the Drake one better, unless you're a massive Kendrick Lamar fan. Uh, so
That's probably, but
uh,
that's interesting. I mean, it's definitely a point of view on listening. And while it feels correct for some uses cases, I don't know if it's obviously not entirely correct. We all have songs that we like, very specific ones that we just want to listen to. And you might want to listen to a cover sometimes, but you also know very well like the beats of it and the
yeah,
even the precision of it. So there is like, it's not going to replace that obviously, but I think what you're talking about is the general habit of like, okay, I want some music on, and
yeah, and I
that
want,
that doesn't really matter. And I guess from extrapolating from what you're saying is that there's a market here that is well served by AI music that could potentially be not just part of the pie of music, but could expand the size of it.
absolutely, and it will expand the size of it because what's going to happen is this is my sort of prediction. Everyone will become a creator, and
Hmm.
everything will
Interesting.
become hyper personalized. Now, I don't mean when I say everything, I want to, because sometimes the internet can run with things. Um, I, I don't think true human artistry is going to go anywhere. There's always going to be human beings that have something to say and an interesting perspective on how to say it. You're always going to have the Beyoncés of the world and the Kendrick Lamars of the world and the whoever you love. You're always going to have that. But what I think is going to happen is you're going to have this new vertical in music, and not just music, in media across the board. You're seeing with OpenAI, they're developing these omni models now that are sort of combined text, image, music, video. These things are all going to be intertwined in these sort of generative models, and what you're going to have is kids who want to make their own stuff and they want to
Hmm.
listen to their own stuff. And it doesn't mean they're not going to listen to the other stuff, the actual human created stuff, but you're going to have this sort of mix of both. And what I think, and by the way, we're already seeing this. Some of these generative AI platforms are really good and they're only getting better. This is the worst they're ever going to sound. And they sound pretty good right
Hmm.
now. So, what's it going to look like in 2 years or 3 years or 6 months? Um, I I believe that these generative models are going to make uh, music as good or better than any human being. Now, that is a subjective thing. When I say better, what I mean is I sit in the studio and I write 100 songs. Only a handful of them are really good.
Hmm.
That's the nature. It doesn't matter how good of the best producers in the world. Their batting average is like 10% at the best. So, we spend a lot of time in the studio making things. These generative AI models are just going to listen to all of the hit records, or you'll be able to point at all of your favorite things, and it's going to make things that sound just like that. And it's going to, deliver these songs with remarkable precision.
Hmm.
And if you want a new hit record to listen to today, you're just going to ask for it, and you'll get it because it knows what you like. These things are coming. Now,
Hmm.
what it cannot replace is the nostalgia or the feeling you get from, if you grew up listening to Drake. Drake has been one of the biggest artists for the last 15 years. So there's a huge amount of society, kids who have grown up where Drake
Right.
was the soundtrack, right? You can't replace that. And so even in,
Hmm.
Hooky is really all about human creativity, but this is actually solving the problem for what does 5 years from now look like? And if anybody can generate a song with anyone's voice at any time with the snap of a finger, there needs to be some sort of licensing framework to allow that
Right.
to happen. You can't just take someone's image or voice, willy nilly. You got to make sure they're compensated for it and that they are approving it. And I think that's
Yeah.
the groundwork that we're laying.
Yeah, well, that's the rub, right? So I could go deep on some of the stuff you just said because I agree with big chunks of it. I think the contention of the connection of music with a particular artist is I'm probably impossible to replicate with AI if that is it is a thing, but I think where we might disagree is how big a factor of that thing is to most people. So if you have Taylor Swift, part of the appeal, or just pick any artist, really, part of the appeal of knowing that artist and even being a casual fan of them, I think, is a component of knowing that they're a person and put effort into the thing you're listening to, and they're trying to convey some kind of message. Now, a artist working alongside AI with that voice is better than AI doing it all themselves, but I don't know if that connection is comparable.
Well,
I think it's missing something.
like I
Anyway,
said, and there's a lot of people, fans are, adamantly against AI right now. And there's sort of this narrative that goes around. But let's keep it real. Those people who are hyper against it, those are the fans. That's the
right.
20% who really listen to music, who really love their artists, who really go to the shows and buy the merch and do all that. That's the 20%. The
Hmm.
80% is the soccer mom who's taking her kids to school and doesn't really care, just slaps the radio on, pop radio, because, feed me whatever is popular right now. She doesn't know the names of the artists. She doesn't follow them. She doesn't know what they're going through. She's not a Swiftie. She's just a mom who's trying to raise some kids and listen to some, music, along the journey, right?
Hmm.
That's a huge portion of the global population of people who listen to music. Not everybody is spending the $1,000 to go to the Taylor Swift show. Now,
But how about this? Is you sparked my imagination here because it's like that. You're right, but how does that manifest in the market as a product, right? Because not everyone's going to be going to Hooky. Like obviously, it's distributed on Spotify. Could you envision in a year, maybe even 6 months from now, but like in a couple of years, get the AI stream tier on us? You know what I mean? Like so. In other words, you can get all this artist music for whatever it is now, right? $20 a month. But hey, if you want to pay only $4 a month and get AI facsimiles of that, because you don't really, you don't need the true music because you just want it sort of for that. You just want good music or even background music. Is that sort of the end product of this vision, and from just sort of a product standpoint, I guess.
well, Hookie's perspective, and really my perspective, is that music should be human created. But there's no shortcut with Hooky. You have to write a song, you have to produce a song, you have to record the song, you have to mix the song, you have to master the song. And all you're doing is taking your vocal recording and turning it into someone else's voice. This is not
Right.
generative, from zero,
End
from
to
a
end,
prompt.
right? I get you. It's not end to end that way.
Right. We are building this in a way for human creators, really to expand the color palette.
Yeah.
However, it would not surprise me if in a few years Spotify starts auto generating songs based on your likes. So you're going to listen to a handful of songs that you really love, and then it's going to learn from that and just make you 20 more.
Hmm.
You won't even know the difference. It will be seamless. if you look at your
Hmm.
phone, it might say this is AI generated. There might be a tag on it or something like that. But when you run out of songs in your playlist, it's just going to generate new ones. And those songs that it generates are just for you. They won't exist for anyone else. They're just going to exist for you. And maybe you can share them with other people. And maybe you can invite people to your playlist so they could hear those things. But those things are going to be generated specifically for you and your taste based on everything else you listen to. This is going to happen. Now, when it
Hmm.
happens, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to predict. Some people say, this level of the technology is 6 months away or a year away, and other people think it's 5 years away or 10 years away. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that was a really good um, thing, the way you explain that, because it's sort of it's a clarifying thing. Because my mind, and I really, it's funny, I shouldn't be doing this because I cover AI a lot, but I immediately sort of went to sort of the scale endpoint of this, where really that's not quite, as far as I understand it, like Hooky is going for. It's like you
We're
said,
not
it's all
building
human created.
purely
Yeah,
generative stuff. I want to make
yeah, it's
things to help human creators.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of in that in between layer almost, if you think about it in layers. Like, okay, like you said it really well when you're talking about sort of scaling time in a way, even though you're not scaling the music itself. It's like an artist only has so much time to do so many things. So does a producer. But if you add this ability to for anyone to sort of do generative stuff with their voice, then they can select from that what, from with, and then obviously the consent and control is the key part of this,
Yeah.
what they might want to add to their pie, so to speak. So it's not like putting their music out at scale, but it is adding more and using AI to do it in a way where you have control over, quality, and just who you're working with, et cetera. So
Yeah, and again, I think by solving this problem and creating some sort of framework around how AI voice can and should be used, um, when these generative models come and they want to include all of these artists' voices, now you've built a framework around how that may or may not be possible. At least we've put a price on the value of an artist's voice. And one of the things, this
is
is not
25% the default? Is that, you mentioned 25% before, but
No,
I
there is
inferred
no
from what you said
default.
they can
There's no,
they can set it.
on Hooky. There's no default. Artists
Yeah,
choose for themselves.
got it.
It's not my business to tell Beyonce what her voice is worth. She might say it's worth 90%, and you know what? She might not be wrong. So we take zero position on that. If an artist wants to offer it for 10%, they could do that. If they want to ask for 60%, they could do that. Ultimately, it's a marketplace. They should decide. It's not my position. All we're doing is building the pipes to solve the problem for them. And I look at, you see a lot of the narrative around Spotify and the streaming deals and the deals that the labels made with Spotify, and artists are getting the short end of the stick and all that stuff. But that's a reality of copyright.
Mhm.
The artists don't own those copyrights. The labels own those copyrights, and the labels invested billions of dollars into owning those copyrights. And so that's the reason it shook out that way.
Right.
Um, but this is an opportunity for artists to get their hands on the wheel, because this is not a copyright issue. This is a NIL right. I suspect there will be new legislation passed in Congress to solve this. But one of the areas they're suggesting should apply right now is the Lanham Act, which
Hmm.
sort of deals with NIL rights and
What's NIL? Can you be that get that again?
name, image, and likeness.
Got it.
Right. So the record companies don't own your name. Well, typically wouldn't own your name, image, and likeness. Now, I'm sure there are some contracts, depends on which artist you are. I'm sure there's some language in contracts that afford the label some sort of interest in this stuff.
Hmm.
And certainly, if you're leveraging copywritten training data, there's a conversation there. But artists could, if an artist owns their own masters, they don't need to use their maybe copywritten data that was owned by a label before. They could just record new data, get in the studio for 20 minutes and record enough vocals to train a model. So the point is, we want to solve this problem so artists are in control, and this is something that they own and that they manage and that they're in charge of. And of course, we also want to partner with labels along the way and ensure that we're training these models on authorized data, right? Like
Yeah.
we one of the pledges we've made is we're not going to train any models without artist consent, like period.
So that's obviously like a key factor in selling this service to artists and labels. I know it's early days. You've really only been live for a few months, but
Yeah.
um, tell me like more about that key component to it, right? Because it sounds like you've thought of everything. It sounds like it's a great, got the end to end for the creators. You have the artists in total control of the share and the consent, and you're doing all the distribution to all these platforms. But correct me if I'm wrong, I do feel like there's a lot of skepticism about AI from artists,
You're not wrong.
because it's very similar to publishing, where there was a lot of damage done in the early days of the technology, where people would, well, in the case of publishing, it was doing articles written by AI and sort of ruining the reputation of certain publications. In this case, it's like, people going and using sort of like Suno and whatever else. And to your point, just releasing stuff and not really knowing what they're doing, but like kind of frightening people. Right. And so I think we see this, and it's not just that sort of thing, but, if you saw the, um, post that Taylor Swift put out about the election, ended up endorsing Kamala Harris. I don't want to talk about that specifically, other than the fact that she name checked AI in that announcement. And it wasn't exactly related to people stealing her songs, but clearly she's concerned about it and people using either her voice or her image or whatever to put out sort of false information about her, or what have you. So I feel like there's been so many headlines. How do you sort of fight against all that, at least perceived negativity about this technology from the artist community?
Yeah, I mean, all we can really do is lead with our best foot forward. I can't solve every single problem with the internet. This is sort of the nature of a place where you have billions of people congregating with lots of different interests and goals and things of that nature. All we can do is our best. So I can solve the problem that I see for artists with respect to music. I think some of the things that we develop and implement will apply to not just music, but film, TV, media, et cetera, other forms of media. Um, there should be permissions granted. Like that's just a baseline, common sense, human, uh, you know, moral stance that we're taking. Does that mean that every company is going to follow that moral stance? No. But what that should mean is that if you believe in that, we ask artists like then support us because we are the ones who are trying to actually get ahead of this problem and solve it for you. Um, and if you don't, and if you remain on the sidelines and remain silent, it sort of encourages other tech companies to come up and just build the thing based on a fair use doctrine, like, oh, it's on the internet, I can train any model I want. I mean, all of the big AI companies are saying the same thing. OpenAI is saying the same thing. Microsoft saying the same thing. They all believe in a fair use right, which basically says if it's on the internet, we should be able to look at it, train models, and do whatever we want with it. Well, I'm not a lawyer, and so I don't know the legal implications here. But I think it's pretty wrong to be able to train a Taylor Swift voice model without her permission. That just seems insane to me. Like, maybe I'm naive, but that just doesn't seem right. And so, but at the same time, the technology exists. It's open source. It's permeating the whole internet. There's nothing that is going to stop it. There's no amount of arguing and complaining and crying on the internet that is going to stop it. None. So
Mhm.
we're actually trying to enact a solution. And the solution is offer uh, people a licensed solution, offer them a pathway to doing it the right way, and our hope is that the majority of people will do the right thing and want to do it the right way. And by the way, by doing it the right way, you're able to build a relationship with that artist that you're working with. So there's benefits on both sides, and I think that's just the right way to do it. And you got to give some amount of goodwill to the community and to the internet to do the right thing here.
Right, absolutely. I think to your point, there's kind of it's not just two paths, but you can definitely see sort of a utopian version of what you're talking about with, licensing and the Napster, the historical lesson of Napster, sort of leading to the iTunes store, leading to streaming services, et cetera, or sort of a dystopian version where it's kind of like we either ban it entirely and the lawyers make a lot of money, and then
That
in
won't
terms
even
of like,
work. We learned with
yeah.
Napster that won't work. Everybody who tried to sue, how do you remember anybody who got sued?
Mm.
What, some 16-year-old kid got sued for $80 million, and like, what does that do? It didn't do anything.
Yeah, it was
All,
supposedly a deterrent, right?
yeah, but it's not, because then a company pops up in China or pops up in Russia or some other territory that doesn't have the U.S. doesn't have jurisdiction over, and
Well, also people just got VPNs.
exactly. Like there's an infinite number of ways around it. We landed on Spotify because look, there peer-to-peer file sharing still exists today. If I don't want to pay for Spotify or Apple, um,
Right.
or any other platform, I think I pay for like four of them. I use all of the different music services. If I don't want to do that and I just want to download all the songs that I want, I can do that so easily. I just like literally Google the song or even just go to YouTube and
Right.
it's
Yeah.
so easy to do that. But you know what? There's a lot of people who pay for Spotify, a lot of people who pay for Apple Music because these services offer functionalities and conveniences, playlisting, things like that, that your own manual work won't do. It's worth it
Well,
for the $11 a month. Just
yeah, and I also think,
worth it.
I think the point also you were just kind of making earlier is that people just kind of want to do the right thing. I think most people, they just kind
Most
of want to
people
like,
do, you know?
they that was the big thing that really resonated during the early Napster years, Napster year, when basically it was like, well, there's no legit solution here. There's no place I can just download a song that I like and pay the artist or the label somehow.
Yeah, and
So what else am I going to do?
the real failure there was on the record companies. And I love the record companies. I built a career working with them as partners. But the real failure was the record companies. Had they licensed the technology and put a paywall in front of it and said we're going to put all of our music on it and we're just going to charge people for it, that could have been done like probably fairly easily,
Hmm.
and they opted to fight it. Now they had never at the time never dealt with any sort of transformative technology of that scope. I guess
Hmm.
when CD burners and cassettes, when you had the dual cassette deck and you could record off the radio. I used to do that. I'd listen to the radio and I'd record the songs onto a cassette from the radio, and then I'd be able to listen to the songs whenever I wanted. Like there were things like that, but nothing that truly disrupted the way that file sharing did. Um,
So where do you see Hooky the company going? Do you see kind of going, getting huge, signing some major artists and labels? You get to have an IPO, or is this
yeah,
more of a sort of showing how it's done for the industry? And do you welcome competition or even an acquisition? What would you prefer?
yeah. My goal is to solve the problem. There is no intentional IPO goal or whatever. I mean, let's build the platform and see what happens. But I'm really just all about solving the problem. When I think of my music career, and I really, I've been so fortunate over the 19 almost 20 years that I've been working music. I've been incredibly fortunate to have been able to work with amazing artists, and I've financially done really well, and like I've had a lot of successes along the way. Um, like when I think about my legacy in music, being able to contribute to solving a major problem, like a major sort of transformative issue in the entire business, that excites me. Being able to actually be a part of a major solution, that really excites me. So of course, yeah, we want to work with the biggest artists in the world. We want to sign them up, whether they want to offer it, offer their voice in this way, or maybe it requires some sort of financial incentive to them for them to participate. Like we'll see. I think at the end of the day, we want to work with all artists because I don't think this is a solution for a handful of artists. This is a solution for the entire industry. And so there should be a way for all artists to participate if they choose to. But again, it's always opt-in. If you really are against it and you have a moral opposition to it, I support that too. Again, we're solving a problem for artists. If they don't think it's a problem to solve, then we don't need to do it.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Jordan, for coming by and sharing everything you're doing with Hooky. Sounds cool. I'd love to catch up with you again in the future and see where it's at.
Absolutely. Would love to.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Hooky's Jordan Young. If you want to learn more about Hooky, head on over to hooky.co. And if you like what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating and review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Be seeing you in the future.